All right, good evening, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank y'all for being with us today. My name is Thomas Gregory, and I'm the Executive Director of the Mississippi Main Street Association, and our team is really proud to be with y'all tonight to share the recommendations that we have come up with over the past 3 days for the city of Pearl. If y'all were here with us on Tuesday night, we sort of explained the process that we have been undergoing. This is a project that we bring to new Main Street communities, and Pearl is one of our newest designated Main Street programs. And so for the past 3 days, we have been developing a set of strategies to help the Main Street program. And so that's what we're going to be sharing with y'all tonight, our recommendations for the future of Main Street Pearl. Before we get started, I want to recognize some folks. First, our team members. As I said, I'm Thomas Gregory. My background is in city planning and administration. I live in Greenwood, Mississippi, and so that's sort of what I have brought to the team this week. Jennifer Lay, they'll raise their hands as I introduce them, is the Director of Community Development for Mississippi Main Street, and she comes from a tourism and a Main Street background as well. So she's looked at some of our promotional aspects. Rachel Carter with Mississippi State University Extension is an economist and market analyst and has been our number cruncher on the team to make sure that everything that we recommend has a possibility of implementation based on Pearl's unique market demographics. And then Andy Kalbach is a designer and planner from Maine. So he's traveled the furthest to be with us, and he'll be sharing some of the plans and the designs that he's come up with for our new downtown. Next is Ben Muldrow, who is the invisible man tonight. Ben will be joining us remotely. He is a marketing and branding expert with Arnett Muldrow and Associates, and is going to be showing y'all some of the concepts that he's come up with from a branding standpoint. And then finally, Randy Wilson, last but not least, as he describes himself as a recovering architect. He is with Community Design Solutions out of Columbia, South Carolina, but has deep Mississippi roots and very close connections to Pearl. And so he's going to be sharing some design concepts with y'all as well. We would not have been able to do what we did without the support of some really important people. So special thanks to Kathy Bourgeois, Stacy Smith, Mayor Jake Wyndham, the Pearl Board of Aldermen, and then we had a series of focus groups. All of our input that we received from focus groups is really what helped guide our recommendations. And so if you're in the room tonight and participated in one of the focus groups over the past 2 days, would you please raise your hand so we can acknowledge you? Thank you. Yeah, and then our interested citizens, we had the town hall meeting on Tuesday night. If you were present for the town hall meeting on Tuesday night, raise your hand. Very good. So again, y'all give yourselves a round of applause. Plans like this don't just come out of thin air. It's developed after a series of community engagement, and the Main Street approach is very specific in that we always want our planning to reflect the ideas that the community has for itself. As we said on Tuesday night, our team members do have a certain level of technical expertise that we bring to the process, but you, the people in this room, the stakeholders and the citizens that participated in the town hall meeting, y'all are the experts in Pearl, right? You know your community better than we do. And so everything that we have designed and developed is a direct response to the feedback and the input that we received over the past 2 days. I also want to specially thank the Spring Lake Garden Club for the beautiful flowers on your table tonight. The Great American Cookie Company provided snacks for us. If you haven't grabbed a cookie, make sure you do that. And then Pearl's IT and Communications Department made sure that everything technical is working. So appreciate everybody who's been involved in the process this week. So without further ado, we're going to get started. And we're going to talk about a series of recommendations, and we have grouped them into 4 themes. And so that's how we're going to be presenting it tonight. 4 primary themes that sort of summarize the primary recommendations that we have for Pearl Main Street. And so our very first person to come and talk to you is going to be Rachel Carter, who's going to talk about our economic development strategy.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everybody, for having us here this week. It's been a very enjoyable week, very enjoyable process, and what I do love about this process is it's very holistic, and we look at this from a lot of different angles because economic and community development is very complex. So the first section is recalibrating the market, and I took a look at a lot of different things, and we'll go through all of that as throughout the next few minutes, but I just kind of wanted to show you just a little bit of an idea of where you stand in comparison to a lot of the communities around you. And as you can see, your median household income is what I would say is probably my favorite judge of where the income levels and the spending power is in a community. And you are, of course, your median income is a lot higher than that of Jackson, Mississippi, but it is comparable to Richland, and then it's a little bit, and it's also higher than the state median income. So that's good news for you all and your spending power that you have locally, but it is lower than some of the other communities such as Brandon and Flowood, and so you have to kind of think about that in mind of what can the local market support. I also wanted to kind of do an age comparison, and I was actually surprised that you all have a pretty young community, and that was very surprising to me because I didn't realize that. And you're getting a lot of young professionals moving into the area, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you do have a fairly young community here in Pearl, Mississippi. And the reason that's important is because you have to think about, well, with the age being a little bit younger and it being people with families and children, how are you going to provide businesses and services that are going to meet those needs? Another thing to think about is I did a trade area analysis of you all, and we do that based on Riley's Law, and part of that is figuring out, okay, how far does somebody have to live from Pearl to still want to shop in Pearl rather than go somewhere else and shop. And this model is really accurate and great to use, but you all are very, very close to other communities, so you kind of get a little bit of the numbers kind of bumping into each other. And so what we have is your average trade area is up to 11 miles because your trade area doesn't extend very far towards Jackson. I think it's 1.5 miles towards Jackson, but then when you go south of this area and you start really extending it out, I think it went up to 23 miles towards Mendenhall. And so you're really drawing in a lot of consumers and shoppers from that area, but maybe not so much from the other areas. So for a lot of the retail analysis, we're going to go with, instead of the average trade area, because that actually bumps you into some of the other towns, we're going to use the 4.5 model, that distance around communities. Okay, the trade area population is basically, if you say we're sitting in the center of Pearl and we draw a line 4.5 miles out and draw a big circle around the community 4.5 miles out. The population within that is much higher than the city limits of Pearl. It's over 40,000. And so that means that you've got a potential local market of over 40,000 people close within that distance of Pearl. Within that trade area, you are leaking a little over almost $900,000 in specialty foods, but that was the only category that we saw economic leakage because you have such a powerful draw of people to your community with your outlet malls and the Brave Stadium and all those things you've got going on, that you are drawing in sales revenue from everywhere else in every other category, which is awesome. That is amazing to see that. I mean, you're bringing in over $114 million into the trade area in the restaurant sector, which is amazing. And then general merchandise is $83 million, and clothing is $37 million. So that's pretty impressive. So that's something to be proud of. If you look at your city dollars, though, and we'll talk about that a little bit, that's not going to pick up. That's not going to be that high because that trade area encompasses a lot of the spending that takes place maybe outside your city limits. When you're doing these kind of studies, especially because of the pandemic, a lot of times existing data can be a little dated or it can be skewed. And so to really get a better idea of what's going on with your local economy and the spending, we did a survey, and you all had over 530 people filled out a virtual survey that was sent out by Pearl Main Street in the city and the chamber, and everybody pushed that out. And so we got a really good sample from your local community. But what we saw was that not everybody in Pearl is shopping in Pearl. Even though it shows that you are not leaking anything, you actually are leaking shoppers. You may not be leaking in the market sector in the trade area when we did that analysis, but only 70% of the people who took the survey are shopping locally for groceries. Healthcare, only about 25%. A lot of people said they were going to Flowood for healthcare, which there is a lot of healthcare available in Flowood, so that makes a lot of sense. Fast food doing really well. Over 80% are shopping here for fast food. But then you get to the upscale restaurant sector, and it's only about 5% are dining here when they choose to go out somewhere nicer. They're choosing to go to Jackson or Flowood or Brandon or somewhere else, and we'll look at that in a minute where they're going. And so those are some of the things that I really noticed. Also, only about 50% of people are choosing here for hairstylists, and to me that's oddly kind of a judge of community loyalty, because people really feel loyal to their hairstylist. So that's something to think about. That might be an opportunity for some growth in your downtown as well. Nightclubs and bars, you know, doesn't seem like that's really a thing that y'all frequent here, and because y'all don't have any. I don't know, the few people that said they were coming here for that, I don't know what they're doing. So anyway, clothing and shoes, you got about 10% of people are shopping locally for that. Now that surprised me, because you do have an outlet mall right here. And so, but as far as the survey respondents, the outlet mall is not where people local are going to shop. The outlet mall is where everybody else around you is shopping, but they're not necessarily the local people. And so that's something to also think about as well. So maybe there's some things that are not available at the outlet mall that might be an opportunity for your local growth in the downtown. Okay, this is where respondents were choosing to shop for some of the goods and services that really stuck out to me. As far as the upscale restaurants, it looks like people were really going to Flowood primarily for that. Then clothing and shoes, Flowood again. That seemed to be where most of, if people were not shopping in Pearl, then they were shopping primarily in Flowood. We did have some folks go into Ridgeland and Brandon. And then we had the outlets of Mississippi as a separate category, because we knew that would have a huge impact on your local economy. And we wanted to see if that was local shoppers, if that was tourist shoppers. And I'm definitely classifying the outlet mall shoppers. That's a tourist attraction. So you're really pulling in people from the outside area. We also asked in the survey what types of businesses that people would like to see in Pearl. And this is an iCloud, word cloud, and the more times a word was mentioned, that's the bigger the word is in the survey. So people would like to see various different kinds of stores, but restaurant was mentioned 150 times in the survey. So y'all would really like something else to eat, somewhere else to eat, it seems like. And then the second thing was a grocery store at 44 responses for grocery store. And that's a tricky thing to think about, and so we'll talk about that in just a minute. Other things that were important to people were family activities, entertainment. Y'all are losing, most of people are going somewhere else for entertainment and recreation. So we do this thing called a Tapestry Segmentation. Esri is where we get the data from that for, and it's really pretty cool how accurate it is. But Esri identifies your 4.5 mile trade area as having two primary market segments. It doesn't mean there's other types of people that live here, but these are where most of the folks fall into the category of the traditional living category or in the bright young professionals category. And so you have primary married couples, some with children, people that are very cost conscious in that traditional category. People are either employed in manufacturing, retail, or I believe healthcare, and then those are folks that really enjoy the outdoors. Simple living, they watch a lot of TV, things like that. Bright young professionals, it's a white collar group. A lot of them are employed in the healthcare sector or maybe in the food service sector. It's a younger market. I want to say around, most people are under 35, maybe even under 33 in that market. And so they enjoy sports, but then they also enjoy fast food. And I thought that was kind of funny. I was like, okay, they're very, very active, but they really like to eat fast food. So that didn't make any sense to me either. But that's what we got. Another thing I wanted you guys to realize is that I did a study. I just looked at some information just about your city in particular and saw that last year in 2021 you had 91 million in hotel and food service sales in this community. That is huge. You had 31 million of that was estimated to be hotel revenues, and that means that you had approximately somewhere between 260,000 and 370,000 rooms were booked within your city limits in 2021. So, and actually the numbers may be even a little bit higher than that. That's a conservative estimate because that's what I prefer to do. And then also retail sales were 675 million. So when people are coming into your town and shopping and spending the night, they are really having a positive impact on your economy. And also, according to Esri, something just to know, because it's kind of a wow factor, is even though that much information is, when you look at the trade area, which is 4.5 miles again, and it's picking up data from outside the city limits, it's showing that you're actually bringing in over $2 billion in sales in the retail and service sector, so in that trade area. So that a lot of that's going to other communities being classified, to other towns, but that's really a huge number. Okay. When we think about recalibrating the market, I want you all to think about, okay, we've got a huge amount of people coming into our community that don't live here, and they're already spending a lot of money here. So how can we capture even more of that, and then how can we use that to support the local businesses and create the local businesses that we as a local community want, so that we're not traveling somewhere else to shop? One strategy to think about, one asset we realize, is that you have some new youth sports fields here. And just a general idea of the kind of impact and the spending power that comes with a youth baseball event is a study that I did a few years ago for Starkville. And if you have a team that I believe has 12 teams, I believe it's a 79 number of teams in a tournament, then the impact of that could be, about $500,000. And that's a 2.5 day tournament. So that's a pretty impressive number, and those are pretty conservative, and they're actually based on spending profiles from a lot of research studies that have been done. But if you think about that, that's a great opportunity to maybe capture even more dollars. When I stayed in the hotel in Pearl this week, and my high school baseball team was staying there, and so I thought that was really cool to be able to see that. So you have an amazing opportunity there, and then you also have the Braves, the Mississippi Braves, we call it the Pirates. And I saw that 119,000 were estimated to have attended there. So think about if you capture a little bit more of the dollars from all those people that are coming to those games. And so you really have a nice captive tourist market here, whereas a lot of other communities really try to do community development in order to attract tourists. Y'all already have the tourists, so use them to channel your community development and use them to pay for it. So these are the strategies that I'm thinking might be a good fit for your community. Is you want to create strategies to capture the current tourism that's already in your area to actually support things that you want to do in the downtown. Really consider entertainment, dining, and service sectors, because that's where the local population is leaving, but then that is also places where tourists are going to spend money. So you kind of have a double whammy right there. Consider businesses that can be enjoyed by the locals but paid for by the tourists, but can supported by the tourists. Because when I looked at your local economy, I did a walk time, and when you start looking at the center of the city and go out just a little bit of distance, the spending power in the downtown area is nowhere close to the spending power as we move out from Pearl. And so whatever you do in the downtown, I really want you to remember that you're going to rely on those folks from outside the downtown to really make that a financially feasible opportunity. Recruit small businesses that can meet the needs of the local population, and those people are going to be cost conscious. So you've got to think about that. Young professionals don't have as much spending money as late career people, and then that the other market didn't have a lot of spending power either. Then think about mixed-use stores and venues. The community seemed to be very interested in a restaurant and in a grocery store. There's no reason why you couldn't combine some of those things together in a single space. And think about that. Anytime you've got different types of revenue coming into a business, then that's going to make it more diversified, and it can make it more financially viable. And then I'd love to see you all create connections between the tourists and potential things that are going to be going on in downtown, and Jennifer is really going to get into that, and so is Ben Muldrow. And one thing that I thought would be really cool that I felt like you didn't have in this community that you may want to think about is some type of a shuttle service. I have it kind of there as a fun party bus, but a lot of communities also do that as a more formal, shuttle from the hotels, but that could be a way to make it easy for people who are not as familiar with Pearl and might not know about your downtown. Those captive tourists, bring them down here. So thank you all. That is all that I have this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to Ben Muldrow virtually.
I'm not Ben. I look a lot better than Ben does. But I'm going to introduce Ben with one comment and then a prerequisite. First of all, this was kind of a guiding principle for us this week that has pertinence both for the economic development aspects as well as the design aspects of what we're doing. It is no secret, you don't have to be a rocket science to drive around Pearl and realize some really smart people, probably in this room and outside of this room, assembled some very, very competitive packages of incentives in order to lure people like the M Braves away from Greenville, South Carolina. Thank you very much. The Mississippi Outlets and Bass Pro Shop, those people can land anywhere they want. And so it takes a city and a community who can assemble very creative incentive packages to land them in your community, and you have done that. Our strong admonition to you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman, and the others, is use that same degree of creativity and thoughtfulness in assembling incentives and treat downtown as the next big development project. I think so often we think of luring somebody else here when it's almost residing right here in our own backyard. And so take the same approach to honor your heart and your soul as you did some of these really wonderful assets on the perimeter of your community. Now, the reason I've stepped in for Ben here is I'm going to introduce him. Our second strategy has to do with proudly telling your story, and Ben's going to introduce this. Now, the reason I'm here is if you could see the colors on the laptop right now versus the colors on the screen, you would be shocked. And that's true of all of our computers. That's true of all of our TV screens. And so, for example, the third bar, believe it or not, is actually an orange, and it looks kind of red here. So here's the point. When it comes to marketing and branding, especially branding and logos, color is critical. So listen to what he says and don't be deceived by what you see. And if you have concerns about the color, make sure before you leave you look on the laptop to see what the colors actually are, or wait about less than 24 hours. We're going to upload all this to YouTube, and you can see those colors there. Again, and please don't receive that as a criticism of your wonderful IT equipment. That's not it at all, Greg. It's just color retention is a tough thing. So don't judge it if the colors look a little strange before you see them in actuality. Does that make sense? Everybody promise? Nod your heads. Tell me you're going to, okay. You're going to extend grace. And so now let's hear from Mr. Ben Muldrow. For those of you who don't know Ben is the premier community branding specialist in the entire world. At this point, this young man has branded over 600 communities across the U.S. And 5 communities. I also consider him one of my best friends. I've officiated both of his marriages. So, so this is Ben Muldrow.
Hello, my name is Ben Muldrow. I'm a partner with Muldrow Associates, and I am proud to share with you this section called Proudly Telling Your Story. This is a branding strategy for Pearl, and as we kind of go through this, I'd love to help build your brand live. I think one of the big things we always try to do is look and pay a lot of respect to all the resources that are already created and existing in the community. So obviously, when we start The next tool that we look at is our typeface. What we've done here is we've gone in and we're making a 3 typeface recommendation for the overall system. Our primary typeface is what we call a slab serif. It's a very traditional typeface. The secondary typeface is a slightly taller sans serif. It has some texture to it. It actually was very much inspired in my time from kind of the look and feel of a baseball scoreboard. So you'll kind of see how that comes out. But I like that kind of casual sans serif secondary typeface. And then we selected a really nice signature typeface that's called Better Times. And it gives us this opportunity to have that kind of look and feel like it was touched by. The third component in our system is our graphics. And again, this is that reference back and that nod to both the badge and the magnolia. One of the things that we wanted to do is we did want to give you a slightly more contemporary version of the magnolia. We wanted to give you something that was a little bit more iconic, and so that you as a community could own that magnolia. Magnolia is used so much across the state of Mississippi with it being the state flower that we wanted to give you something that could truly be. And then finally, that lands us on the message. The message is that fourth primary component to help land us on the overall brand system. For this, what we like to do is draft a brand statement. This brand statement talks a little bit about some of the values and things that we're excited about, and helps kind of lead in to our naming recommendation for this district as a whole. So I'm going to jump in and see if I can read this for you now. We are where Mississippi comes to celebrate America's pastime. We are the crack of the bat, the perfect place to stretch, the home of the brave. We are where Mississippi comes to shop. We are the fashion runway, the amazing deal, the allure of outdoor destination. We are where Mississippi comes together. We are the jewel of the crossroads, the place that gets you to where you were headed. We are Pearl, Mississippi, and we are paddling again. In the heart of our southern small town, we are weaving together our assets. We are crafting a bold vision. We are creating an energy in a place that we call Midtown Pearl. Midtown Pearl truly is in the middle of it all, from higher education to global travel, from recreation to shopping, dining, and more, connecting world-class assets and a small town feel, giving our community that place to gather, that place to grow, that place to love. We invite you to be part of Mississippi's newest downtown, Midtown Pearl. Come home. And with that, that gives us what we call the destination brand. With this destination brand, obviously you see that updated version of our magnolia, kind of subtly set on top of the home plate. If you pick up on that little reference there to some of our assets that draw visitors from all over the state to us. But again, not so obvious that it dictates the design. You can see we really use that kind of signature inline typeface for the name Pearl. This gives us a thoughtful alternative to the script of the city primary brand. Maybe gives us a little opportunity to have some additional legibility in certain applications. But again, you can see the incorporation of that city badge into our center option and the opportunity to kind of blend together some of these messages. We really believe that this idea of Mississippi's newest downtown, that is a phenomenal launch strategy for the message. Gives you the district gateway markers with wayfinding with our trailblazer signs, large scale and small scale parking designations, informational kiosks, pedestrian scale directional signs. All of those components really go into this comprehensive wayfinding system. We made a point to really hone in on those city colors so that this wayfinding system could very much connect with a larger citywide Pearl, Mississippi wayfinding system. Simply by changing Midtown Pearl for Pearl, Mississippi, you can use the exact same signs and sign lines to be able to craft that system. Now, another thing we always like to look at is our street banners, bringing color and light to our street that increases that repetition, lowers that visual cone, and introduces those brand colors in the public space. So here's just a set of a couple different ideas that might kind of allow us to add some color and spice throughout the district. From there, we also like to look at what we call guerrilla wayfinding signage. This is the kind of stuff that you can literally print on plastic and put out tomorrow. All of them are set up in either walking or biking minutes instead of destination, and they're very, very conversational in nature. They build intrigue and get people interested in getting on the ground and exploring the district for themselves. We've got some business opportunity pieces that, again, Jen will talk about. But one of my favorite things to really get into is our merchandise. Being able to get our brand on branded merchandise and being able to give our businesses an opportunity to profit off the connection that people have. So whether we're talking about the PSG shirt from Columbia, whether we're talking about one of those hydro flasks that you have to take a second mortgage out to buy a water bottle, all of those components kind of build in to building that brand distinction. Giving the tools out to our businesses so they can create their own branded merchandise, whether it's a coffee shop doing coffee sleeves or whether they're creating cappuccino mugs for people to buy and take home. The city itself has a formal city flag, but one of the big things that we're seeing across the country is more of a neighbor flag, more of the kind of thing that people would see hanging off of their front porches. So we simply threw together a design what a house flag might look like for Pearl with this great kind of up-to-date magnolia leaf that can truly be yours. But then also that general merchandise, the shirts, do you have anything that says Pearl that you're proud to wear across the state? Maybe it's, a lot of times in communities that we can get something related to the high school. So this gives us some additional options and additional tools. And then finally, we talk a lot about retail, a lot about shopping, owning, make sure that you've got that opportunity to, as you're going through, as you're maybe frequenting the farmer's market, as you're going and, getting your groceries, being able to carry that brand with you. This is such an amazing opportunity for Pearl, Mississippi to be able to craft and shape this heart of the community. You're experiencing new neighbors that are coming in. It is so vitally important that we create those retail hubs now, and we help all of our residents, both new and old, to truly fall in love with the community and play a part of its future. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate virtually with you all, and I know you're going to be thrilled by everything else that you see tonight. So thanks, and keep up the good work, and can't wait to come home.
Hello, guys. Thank you so much for having us tonight and this week. We've had a great time. You're going to see a lot of the same things that Ben talked about, but what I love about this section is that we always talk about how data drives our stories. And so you heard Rachel talk a lot about the data, and you heard Ben really tell the story of not only what we've heard that Pearl is, but what you want to be. And so when we talk about connecting the dots, we truly are connecting the dots. Ben referred to these world-class assets that you have. And so we're going to look at how we take those assets that you have Thank you. We'll take the assets that you already have, assets that could have gone anywhere, that could have gone to Jackson, that could have gone to Flowood, but they chose to be here in Pearl. And we're going to take that and maximize it by bringing in that small town feel and bringing this Midtown area to life, so that you not only have the asset of the ball field and the shopping center, but you have a unique characteristic that is only in Pearl, that you can't find anywhere else, because your characteristic is your people. It's your heart, it's the love for the community, the love for your school, and the love just for the place to be. And so what we're going to do is show you how you can create this sense of place and how you can share that message with everyone else. All right, so we're going to talk about how to bring Midtown to life. First of all, I wanted to get into a mission, because I was really excited the other night in the group setting that we had when you guys looked at each other and said, what is our mission? Because oftentimes we write mission statements, but you can't quote them. You couldn't quote your mission statement, and that's fine because it is quite long. Sometimes it's housed on the website, but you need to have the root of what it means, and it's how you feel and it's what you want. Your mission statement should reflect the objective that you hope to achieve in the end and portray who you are while you're working towards that. So our mission is Main Street is a grassroots economic development effort. We believe in the unique character of our place, the power of our people, and the effectiveness of our four-point approach to make Midtown vital. Our vision is dedicated to creating a vibrant downtown where friends gather, businesses thrive, memories are made, and communities grow stronger. Midtown is the place to go to feel connected. The reason we chose the words that we did about being connected is because we heard all week long about these kind of polar opposite ends of the community, the east and the west, and there's one side and this side. And so as we tell the story of Midtown, we really want you to feel like Midtown is a created space that your community finds their middle ground, that everybody is bridging the gap between the two sides, and that everyone comes together to gather and finds their shared purpose. We talked a lot as well about how when you create a downtown, and when you think about a downtown historically, you think about that watering hole area, that town, the old pharmacy or the soda shop where you ran into your neighbors and you asked how your children were doing and how your grandkids were doing. And that's what we aim to achieve with the development of the Midtown area. So talking about Midtown and how we develop that, as well as the other areas of your community, we need to identify our audiences, because Rachel talked a lot about how you have a very heavy tourism market. You have strong economic impact numbers as far as retail goes and dining, but how do we translate that into people who will not only want to open businesses in Midtown and be in Midtown, but vice versa. So connecting the dots and really cross-pollinating those two markets of the very, kind of corporate retail versus that small-scale retail, that boutique economic development that you're going to find in the Midtown area. And so we're going to talk a little bit about each of these audiences, the locals, the new residents, the outlet shoppers, the baseball fans, and the developers and the investors who will seek to hopefully want to open businesses. So we have different messages for different audiences. For instance, someone said, I want my children to want to come home to live. I want them to want to come back to Pearl. Then we heard what a wonderful school district you have. You also have industry. You have a large company, for instance, the one that makes all the boxes, I believe it's for FedEx. We need to retain those students who are getting a wonderful education to stay here in Pearl and to keep that investment that you've made in them as a school district here, so that the creativity, the capacity, the growth, the brains are here in Pearl. And we're just going to play on that through these messages, and we're going to target all of those audiences to give them the reason to know that they have a place in Pearl and that they belong here too. So the first one is the proud locals. This came out of what we heard again, that we want our kids to want to stay here, to find their home here, to raise their children here. Part of finding a sense of place is remembering why you love your community. You love your community because you're proud of it, not just because you have good memories, but because you know that this place is like no other and that it's special. And so in the data, where we talk about the data driving the stories, I want to break that data down to where you can use it to tell Pearl's story, because numbers are numbers, and I don't really like numbers. And I love to listen to Rachel because Rachel makes the data sound so easy to understand. But we're going to make it even easier and use it as a tool for people to say, wow, Pearl's got it going on. So for instance, this is an example of a graphic. It's actually two graphics that could be used for, say, a social media campaign. Rachel talked a lot about your Tapestry segments, and both of your Tapestry segments identified your markets as consuming most of their information on the internet, social media, or their cell phones. And so looking at graphics and ways that you can share information quickly, you can come up with these very easy ads, if you will, to share, to just remind people what's going on in their own backyard. So loving local flavor, the $91.8 million in hotel and restaurant revenue in Pearl in the year 2021. That is phenomenal. That is a number that most people couldn't achieve in a 10-year span. Additionally, people feel at home here. They feel at home here, so they're staying here. They're staying here more than one night. They're staying here 2 nights and 3 nights, and they're coming back. Remember that number that Rachel said, the 377,000 room nights in a year. And so that totals about a $34 million impact. And so these graphics need to be used to remind you guys and your community the importance of that area where the Bass Pro is and where the hotels are and where the shops are. I know I come from a college town, and I've marketed a college town, so oftentimes there's this battle between the residents and the college kids. And if I could guess, it's probably the same with the malls and Bass Pro. People are visiting your community, but you feel differently about your community because you live here and you love it. But those people serve a purpose. Those people are creating economic impact that are going into your budget through sales tax diversions that are giving you the quality of place that you want for where you want to live. So reminding our internal market this is very important. So again, Proud Local, this is another ad that we could do, that special feeling when you're home. That special feeling when you don't have to leave to live somewhere to work and to raise your family. There's something special about being home. Now, obviously, there is a nod to the baseball stadium, and so this is sort of a cross promotion. This is not only speaking to people that we want to stay here or to come back here, it's also saying to the people that are here for a baseball game, you love it here, you can come home here too, and we welcome you. And so this is just another example of a graphic where we utilize that branding that Ben described to share with our audiences. So for new residents, the baseball goers, the shoppers that we want to convert to residents, I urge you to remember, you know, everyone wants their community to grow. No one wants their community population to decline, and nobody wants it to stay flat, because the bigger you are, the more money that you're producing, and the better your quality of life is. And so always remember that a new resident or a new business owner is always a visitor first, always. I love this part about what I do because I get to come into the communities that we work at, and I truly get to see it as a visitor. No matter how many times I've been to the Jackson area, I get to see things through the lens of a visitor, but told by the stories that I hear from you guys. And so every new resident is a visitor first. So remember that, and everybody that you meet on the street that might be here shopping or might be here to go to Sam's or to go to Bass Pro. And a good way to convert those visitors to new residents is to put the information that they need at their fingertips. Now, I know this is small and you can't see it, but we will provide this later. This is what we would consider a welcome packet. So a packet of information that someone can get on the website of the organization and say, I'm interested in living here. How can I live here, and why would I want to live here? And so you'll see that they have sections, a welcome letter, a glance at the community, you know, the housing and workforce statistics, and so on, how you get here, where it's positioned in the region and in the state. And then the housing and workforce, just as one example, talking about the median house income. This is where you give all of the things, all of the statistics that you think people want to know about why they would come to Pearl, Mississippi. And so this is in the form of a booklet. You could put together a folder, and it could be housed in real estate offices, it could be housed in hotels, it could be housed in the chamber office, or again, like I said, on the website in a virtual document. And again, the new residents are coming because they want to live in a place that feels like home. And so going back to that mission statement that I referenced that we can't always remember how to quote, I take away several things from that statement. And we're looking to gather, we want to grow, and we want to connect. And so that's what you want as residents, and so that's what we want to promote that people can get from Pearl should they choose to live here. And so you just see some of the other variations of the merchandise and the things that make people proud of their place that have been put together. You've got a welcome mat, and then again the flag, so that when a visitor comes to your town, if they see those flags, it just breeds this curiosity, and they go wanting to seek more of that. But it also says, wow, these people really love where they live. You see yard signs all the time for high schools, and you see, we love the police and things like that, and it says something about the person who lives in that home. Same thing with this flag. It says something about the person that lives there, that they love Pearl, and they want you to know that. All right, so the outlet shoppers. The next two sections that we're going to talk about is really identifying that tourism market that Rachel identified. And it is a huge sector of your economic impact and your engine that generates everything that you like about this community. And we found in our own research that the outlet area with the ball field and Bass Pro and Sam's Club has a corporation that's probably doing some retail recruitment for them. And they have branded themselves, or are beginning to brand themselves, as the Connection. And it's really interesting because we heard that's kind of organically come up throughout the week in our conversations that we've had. And so it's really important to see here that they've identified that they can't just market Sam's, or they can't just market Cavender's, but they're all better if they market everything. It's that rising tide floats the boat concept, that when we're all strong, we're all better. And so thinking about the Connection, and as well as the baseball stadium. I'll go back to this graphic that's been created from midfield to midtown, trying to make that connection in people's heads that they can get from the baseball field to this new midtown area. Whenever we talk about retail recruitment specifically, and we talk about economic development, there's often this thought that the retail that resides in a downtown district is competing with the retail that may be on Highway 80. Not true. Completely not true. We look at retail in different sectors as complementary to each other. Each of it serves a purpose, each of it serves an audience, and we seek to create a diverse retail environment, and there's offerings for everyone in all of the different places. What you can get at Sam's and the things that you can buy in bulk at Sam's, you're probably never going to find in your downtown district, and that's okay because that serves a different purpose for a different person every day. And so remembering these two markets is really important, and also cross-promoting those two markets. Ed McMahon is Chairman Emeritus of the National Mainstreet Association, and he's written tons of op-eds that have run in Mississippi, and he spoke at our most recent conference. And he's just so inspiring about community development and why we do community development. And he said that successful economic development is rarely about that one big thing. More likely, it is about lots of little things working synergistically together in a plan that makes sense. And so I've said this before, the way the Main Street approach works is that it's small and it's incremental. And it's sustainable because of that, because it's a plan. Randy often likes to say that Main Street is a way to manage the change in your downtown. So I'm going to make that a little broader if I can and say that Main Street for Pearl is the way to manage the change in your community and in your city. Main Street is coming in as a dynamic force to connect all points of your community and to make your community stronger and to capitalize on what you already have. Even though we are looking at creating something new, we're capitalizing on your current assets. So it's not just a cookie cutter creation. It truly is a plan that's built on Pearl's unique assets. And so using Main Street to manage that plan is really important. All right, so the last audience that we're going to talk about is the developer and the investor. You'll see later the thought process behind Midtown and that real city center that we seek to create. And in doing so, inevitably, we'll have to fill the retail space. How many people see retail developments that are up and they might have 15,000 square feet and they're empty, right? And so that's because there's not a strategy that's being utilized to target the right people to go into those spaces. And so using these signs that have been created, you can use them in various ways. The signs were technically created to put around town for people to know how to move around your community, but I would also argue that they could be used to market to an investor or to a developer, that if he's going to locate or she's going to locate their business in this area, this is why it's a great area. Because when you're right here, you have access to so many things. I mean, I even said the other day, as a crow flies, I think the baseball field is only about 3/4 of a mile away. So making those connections for people and making them real in their minds and telling them, you cannot expect people to understand those connections on their own. So we've got to break it down, and we have to put it right in front of them for them to understand how this community moves and what the closeness is and how they can benefit from the different markets. Additionally, here's another example of that campaign ad that we talked about. Obviously, this could be a virtual, kind of a social media. If an economic development department of the city wanted to run a campaign for retail recruitment, this would be something that they would utilize to pique the interest of a future developer or a future investor. People are hungry for Pearl. Within 4.5 miles, Rachel talked about that trade area analysis, and about 4.5 miles is the area that you look at that people are drawing in around the community. And so as a developer that's going to come in and invest quite a bit of money to open a business, they need to know that. They don't need to look at just the population of Pearl. We want them to also realize that Pearl has a larger spending power than just the community that lives here. And so by sharing these numbers with them, the $11.4 million of what they spend on full service dining, that piques the interest of a potential restaurant to open in the area and what they can capitalize on. All right, so this is that ad again that Ben suggested, Midtown Pearl. There's opportunity in the middle of it all. So again, playing off that connecting point, that this Midtown development is going to be the center point in the community, and it's in such close proximity to youth athletic fields that you have, and I'm sure there's some probably adult sports played there as well, basketball right in the back parking lot here, a mall, Bass Pro, baseball, that density of people, Midtown is centered right in the core of. And so this is a marketing that would be used by the city or the Main Street Association to recruit those investors and developers. All right, and so talking about these points, Ben talked a lot about connecting the dots, and I said earlier that we literally have to connect the dots. We have to connect the dots for people, because you can't expect people to understand something or to see something on their own. Oftentimes we talk about, one of the communities we were working in last couldn't get students 500 feet up a hill to go downtown. And so oftentimes, if you don't know what's there or you can't see it, you're not going to go. So we have to tell them. We have to tell them why they need to get up and go there. And so that's what this wayfinding signage is going to do. It's going to make people take the guesswork out of how to move around your community. So if they're at the mall, say shopping, or they're at Sam's for the day, and they're looking for some lunch, if there's some wayfinding signage pointing to the Midtown area that has a restaurant, that's going to immediately send them there. Somebody in one of our stakeholder meetings said, why would you go from Bass Pro to a coffee shop or a bakery on Old Brandon Road? Well, we're going to tell them why, because it's there, because now they're going to know it's there, and they're going to be curious, and they're going to be interested, and so their mind is automatically going to want to go seek that experience. Same thing, cross promotions. Not only do we want to move them around, we also want to use the opportunity to market to the crowds that are there. Just like Rachel talked about, you have that captive audience in the people who are coming to shop and going to baseball. So use them. Use that market to tell people what's going on in Midtown Pearl, what's here, what they can do. And so digging a little deeper into the merchandise that Ben showed you earlier, a great idea would be the coffee cup. The local coffee shop baker might want to have this coffee cup to promote, the development of Midtown Pearl. There may be a coffee shop at the outlet mall who would like to work with Main Street to show these cups, because they can, with the right strategy, buy into the idea that marketing the district is good for them, because if people are coming, they're going everywhere, and people will come for more to do. Same thing with the bags. One of the things that Ben didn't say, if you notice, the Midtown Pearl bag, Mississippi's newest downtown, has the red stitching of the baseball. So again, that cross promotion, identifying for people, saying, we know we have different things in our community, and we're embracing that, and we're capitalizing on that. So everyone that's here for something, there's a place for them. And so these bags could be used at whether you had a farmer's market, or even as I can see a Pearl Day at Trustmark Park, where you begin to promote this new district and you're handing out bags and you're telling people about Midtown Pearl and the development and why things are so exciting about that development. So how do we do this? How do we achieve this? We've talked about the data, we've talked about the audiences. It's no secret that we're literally going to build a new development from the ground up. So what do we do in the meantime? Why are we going to identify these audiences and begin to market them when we don't have that? But we do. We're sitting in it. We're sitting in the asset that you have right now. And so we're going to begin to start to capitalize on that recognition of Midtown Pearl because we're here, and it can be something that we can embrace. So no offense to the City Hall complex, but saying something like, we're at Midtown is a lot more fun and a lot more feeling-oriented than the City Hall complex. And so creating the idea that people are excited to be in this place and that they know it and they remember it every time they think about it is important. And so you guys have done a great job of creating a strong lineup of events that span throughout the year. Oftentimes we have to kind of fill in the gaps of things that don't happen, but you guys literally have a pretty robust calendar of events. And so the recommendation is that you continue these existing events and you continue to have them here because you're sort of programming the place before the place, if you will. Having those events here and branding them as hosted by Main Street and powered by Main Street and having them at Midtown and identifying that as the location will begin to build that familiarity that you want people to have once there is an actual development. So building on that, take that initial calendar of events, continue that programming, continue to keep it strong, continue to keep it consistent, and then think about building it out a little bit more. Take your calendar and make sure that you always have something going on, that people know that sometime in that month there is going to be an event in Pearl, and so they will build that recognition. My gut would tell me that people probably know what Trick or Treat Street is, and they know when it's going to happen, and they expect it every year, and they look forward to it. And they probably, if you don't have it at the same time as Halloween, plan their times that they need to have their costumes by because they know every year to expect it. And we all know that parents want those kids to get more than one use out of their costume. So keep doing those things and giving people reasons to get out so that they're not just getting out of their house, but they're reconnecting with people. That's where you're starting to build engagement. That's where that sense of pride and that sense of place comes. We talked a lot about the Heart of Pearl, and I know that that is an existing shopping center, but downtowns are literally the core of your community. Your city center is the core of your community. And the core of your community, the core of a body is where your heart is. And everything pumps out from your heart. And so solidifying that this area is where your heart is only going to strengthen the other areas outside of that. So once you fill in those gaps, and maybe you don't, maybe that's a slow progression, figuring out a way to plan those, even if you can't set the date immediately, by month. Go ahead and get your calendar out. Let people know that in October this event is happening because they remember that. Whether you were to share this on social media or you were to mail out a postcard or put a rack card at a shopping center, if I walked into the Gap outlet and said, can I put a frame here with this little card on it so the people that are here know that there's an event, maybe they'll come back next month. Cross-promoting areas where you tell the stories about those events and the markets of people that you reach. Are going to begin to build that remembrance that these events are going on. So this is just a couple of different examples from communities that we've worked in. Your graphics don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be art. They don't have to be graphic. They can be however you choose to embrace the way that you show yourself through the branding that Ben has provided. But I strongly suggest that you keep it consistent and that when everybody looks at your image, they automatically identify that that's Pearl and that that's Midtown. So starting now, how are we going to bring this area to life? Well, you're already doing that by your events. So I suggest that you continue to just plan events throughout the time. Summertime is a perfect example. Kids are out of school. I guarantee you there's some stay-at-home moms that would love something for their kids to do during the day. You've got some green spaces at the football field. You've got parking lots. Consider things like a cornhole tournament, things like water play for kids on the grass on the football field, a farmer's market. We heard several times that there was an interest in the community investing investing in creating a farmer's market. Those are things that are going to set you apart, that aren't just something to do, but that's a quality of life thing. So when somebody's looking to move here and they're going to look at the health of your area and the options that you have, you might not have that grocery store that Rachel talked about, but you might have a farmer's market, and that's an option for someone who's looking for healthy living, which is what was identified in your segment. So continue to plan the space, even before there's a build-out. Use these open spaces as gathering places. They can be planned out, super sophisticated events, or they can be something as simple as a midweek water day for kids. And promote them and enjoy them. Now you're going to say, how are we going to do that? We only have one staff member, right? And this is something that we'll get into the report more, but begin to build your committees and utilize volunteers to help you manage those things. You know, begin to build your stakeholder groups of people that are interested. If there's a couple of moms who have kids and they want something to do, engage them and let them help you volunteer, because you can't rely on just a staff of 2 or 3 at the city alone to do all of this stuff. So the community engagement begins to come in having people jump on board and help you. And not only help you, but give you their ideas so that you're actually providing what the community wants. Because we could sit around and plan an idea all day long, but if your community doesn't want it and nobody comes, then we've done an event for nothing. And the investment has been, there's no ROI on that. So begin to engage your community, talk to them about what they want, and ask for people to come to the table and help volunteer for these efforts. And then, looking at the areas that we talked about, programming the space before there's an actual place. The football field, you know, you've got this, the corner lot that's empty, and I know there's a lot of programming that happens there. There's a lot of pride in having events on the football field because people have been doing that for generations and generations. So there's a lot of space to be utilized in this area, even before there's a building for it to be done in. And so I want you to think specifically maybe about this corner lot. It's empty, which is great. There's nobody there. It's a blank slate. You can pretty much do whatever you want. People are always looking for open space to do something in a dense area like the center of your city. So think about taking this, and before we look at the grand plans of anything that we're going to build that might cost who knows how much, and before we talk about having to put it on an RFP to find engineers and find builders, what can we do in the meantime? What is the low-hanging fruit? Well, these open spaces are low-hanging fruit with very small improvements, and you have something like this. Shade structures. And Randy will talk more about this later. I'm not even going to begin to be a designer, so I can just show the pretty picture that he created. But this is an example of a space that's a complete blank slate and something that can be done over a weekend. And you all of a sudden have an area that people are drawn to. These sticky places that we call them, places that people want to be. And so you throw out some chairs, you throw out some benches, maybe some games during the day. Since it's right next to City Hall, it's very easy for people to put them in and take them out. And they're inexpensive, you know, so if you leave them out overnight and one disappears, my gut tells me they're not going to, because when people have a sense of pride and they have a love for where they're at, that's not always an issue, but we all know that that can happen. But it's very low-hanging fruit, inexpensive things that give people an opportunity to remember why they love being here. And that begins to build the momentum for them to want more, and that drives the plan that we're going to talk to you about in a little while. I think that's my last slide. All right, so that was bringing Midtown to life. And so now I'm going to pass it over and let Andy talk to you about design.
All right, thanks, Jen. So the last theme that we mentioned earlier, that there were 4 themes, is build Mississippi's newest downtown. And the first step in that with any project that is a development project is basically to start with a plan, which is where we are tonight. There's a lot of time and information that has gone into the last 3 days and discussions with you all, as well as our team discussion. You know, you're building a downtown. There's a lot of discussions that we could have, but I'm assuming you probably want to go home tonight for dinner versus next Tuesday. So in order to make that and kind of recap it in a way where we're concise and we can get to the portions that are the most important parts of the plan to encapsulate that, we've broken it out into 4 sections. Not ironic that it just parallels the 4 themes that we started with tonight. A lot of you know this already, but just for reiteration's sake, you know, we're the site that we're talking about, and I don't know if the laser pointer is going to work, but anyway, we're sitting almost dead center on the page where the CC is for Community Center, and the site is bounded on the north by Parkway Drive, which is just behind here, I believe, and Old Brandon Road, and then on the right by Beardeman and Valentor. So as we go forward, this is what we're going to be looking at in plan form. Just a quick recapitulation of what we heard Tuesday night through today, well, Tuesday morning, really, and Tuesday night through today. But the unique part about this, and that we've worked in many, many communities over the years, is that you've got an ownership out here that is publicly owned. The city owns the land. I can't tell you, probably on one hand, of communities that I've worked in where there's this much land available in a downtown that you have what we would call control over. That's an extremely advantageous position to be in, because you can control what goes in there and how it goes in there, and effectively do it in a way that it's going to be successful in the long term. And it's obviously a canvas, just that last point on the bottom, that you can now start to encourage local investment and ownership within that, whether it be a shop owner, whether it be a developer, whether it be a potential future resident who wants to live in more of a downtown environment. We heard a lot of these, obviously, Tuesday night. These are the things that make a downtown, which make it a place to be, what's going to make it Midtown. The one that I just want to point out briefly at the top is that what we do want to think about, though, is this is a different type of development than what we're used to. This is not how Bass Pro Shops got built. This is not how, the outlet mall got built. You start to think about things in three-dimensional scale. Thomas is going to touch on that briefly as well. And then the toolkit of what goes into making a plan for a downtown. A lot of this stuff is contained in the plan. We're going to touch on it. We've touched on it a little bit already. We'll also be hitting a lot more of this when we deliver the report in a little bit more specificity and detail. So with that, we've developed a plan with really, really bright red roofs. This is not intended to be. This is a graphic that will guide us through what the plan will be. I am joking about the roof color. I would not recommend putting red roofs on your buildings like this unless you want to be seen from outer space. But we're going to walk through this in a way that breaks it down so that it's a little bit more manageable to understand. The darker sort of brown color you see now are the buildings that would remain. Those are some of the public entities that are really going to start the heart and soul of building the downtown. The roadways that you see, again, Parkway at the top, Valentor on the left, Beardeman, on the right, and then Old Brandon on the bottom. Those are the roads that exist today. Taking that a step forward is starting to build what you're just building a downtown grid that becomes suitable for development. I mentioned that you've got the vacant land. I mean, you've literally got 6 blocks right here. They're small town blocks. They're nice and walkable. They're going to be very comfortable. They're going to be very attractive. And obviously, with that, you've got to fold in some infrastructure to make that happen. Not ironic, in the middle of that green square is the existing, help me out again, Public Works building that is coming down that is slated for open space. Lo and behold, it's a great location to now start to build your town green, your town square, where you can do a lot of the programming and events and festivities and a lot of the things that Jen just alluded to, that will ultimately be housed in there. What that also serves is an extremely good catalyst for building. It is a very attractive way to attract downtown construction, particularly in a mixed-use sense, which is where you're going to have one use on the ground floor and potentially another use on a second floor, and then potentially residential uses above that. Bottom line is it's a mix of types and uses. These buildings are strategically located, too, that they would be attractive to ground floor retail uses. Beardeman is obviously a very attractive edge. It's got a lot of visibility, particularly the corner at Old Brandon. And then you'd have sites, you have the 2 buildings that would be flanking the new park space. Those are great places for restaurants, gathering, things like that, to both energize the park and also to attract people into downtown. Taking that a step further, we looked at providing some interior housing, if you will, that would not be necessarily, that wouldn't be mixed use, but it offers you a different product type to potentially attract different residents into the market. It could be an urban townhome, it could be a condominium, it could be continued apartments, it could be a combination of those. The other unique part about what we're seeing a lot of these being built around the country is that they park themselves, which I'll allude to a little bit further. They provide parking in the backs underneath. Everybody's favorite. You've got to have downtown. Where am I going to park? Aptly picked purple as a color. I don't know why for parking, but all of that is purple areas. What we've done is we've started to address housing the parking that will be needed. Bottom left, the library lot now is great, but we feel like we could, with some a little bit of relaying that out and expanding it a bit, that would provide some more surface area parking. Senior Center, another parking facility that would be kind of behind that, and then behind the new mixed-use development that would occur along Cunningham Road extended. 2 surface lots, obviously, on the right side of the page. The dashed red line that you see is what we're alluding to as on-street angle parking. We've concentrated some of that parking near some of the areas that would be very attractive to commercial and retail entities to just increase the number of parking that would be available on street. And then the dashed blue line that you see would be areas where you could utilize parallel parking. It just provides a little bit better view shed into things and would provide parking at front doors, particularly for some of the uses that could be housed in the park and then the other shop owners that would be located along in those areas. One of the things we realize is that by building a new roadway through, that would be Pine Park connecting to Cunningham, that's going to require some new visioning, if you will, for the spaces that are between the Civic Center and the library. So what we wanted to do was focus on that sort of center spine, which is now your sort of primary public space, the highly viewed space that would occur that starts to create the downtown itself. So there's that entry park space that I just mentioned that would be between the community center and library, and then a little further more up the page where the public works is now, there's an opportunity to do a plaza space, which would create an aperture, if you will, into the new town center. And then at the top, obviously, is where we've talked about the town green. I'm going to share a little bit more about that in a second. The one thing that we wanted to touch on here is that, the existing gym is a really great venue, potential venue for expanding on how it's used. Granted, it probably needs a few renovations. It could use conditioning so that it's not 125 degrees in there in the middle of summer. But you continue to use it as a sports venue, but then there are other arts and cultural things that you could be doing in there to maximize its use. I mean, we heard mention of even a dinner theater, and there would be, an event that would be tremendous. Not ironic is that it also anchors the corner of that park, which is an advantageous location to be sitting in. So back to that entry park place. Obviously, we have a new road that will be bisecting that, and we need to redesign that after the road construction. Given the architecture in the library and some things that we heard the other night about having a more naturalized feeling, if you will, I believe someone mentioned a wildflower walk. There's a nice soft entry that you do as just a landscape treatment with some pathways that you can kind of see serpentining between there. The yellow and orangish would infer that would be some planting. What it is, it creates a nice gateway piece that is accommodating to the architecture that exists, but that also makes a pronounced statement as you move into Midtown. And these are just examples in other communities of treatments that can be used, from just the planting alone to providing an entity like getting community engagement, garden clubs to be involved with it, and even using it for educational purposes, which with its proximity to the library works hand in hand. You could do interpretive gardens. A lot of people do, butterfly gardens, and you can do wet gardens. Certainly get rain here, and sort of things like that. That second space, then moving northward into the site, is the space in front of the public works. That's that sort of scribbly blue area is what we would foresee as a water feature. We heard the notion of obviously pulling kids and children and families into downtown. That's a really great spot where you could do something that's a little bit more interactive that kids could play in. And again, you create a plaza space that's now kind of another signature piece that you're adding to pull yourself into downtown. And I'm sure some of that's probably obviously, but you want shade, you want benches, you want seating, you want lighting, you want things that will help people feel comfortable within that space. This is an example. These are really successful examples of the top two are actually the same plaza, but you can see how during the day, it can act as a plaza space. There may be events and times where you want to turn the water off and you want to program it. You can do that, but then at nighttime it also has a certain ambiance to it where it's more artistic and expressive. And again, the bottom, two examples. The one on the bottom right is even has gone as far to incorporate music and things like that. They do holiday events and use that to celebrate with that. So the last space we want to talk about in detail, of course, is the town green, or the park green. That would be really the signature icon within Midtown. That top white box represents what would be a piece of architecture that could be a pavilion. It could take on a lot of different forms, but the bottom line is it's flexibly used so that you could put a farmer's market in it, you could hold band concerts in it, you could hold your, bingo on the lawn is incredibly popular apparently anymore. All those things. You could even potentially do weddings in it, movie nights, et cetera, et cetera. Again, it's designed in a way that would accommodate all those. Lawn space is very key in downtowns. That gives you the flexible canvas for large gatherings, small gatherings. You can activate it during the day with some things that we're going to share with you in a second. On the outset of that, you can see some lines that represent giving it parking, which is critical for both downtown stores, offices, and potentially residents that might be housed in those buildings. There's another white sort of linear box that you'll see at the bottom of the page. Given that this is Mississippi, one of the key factors in park spaces is shade. We foresee that as a potential element that is, it's either got a roof over it or it's like an arbor or something, structural that just gives some relief to that. And again, all the circles represent trees, shade, landscape, lighting, those sorts of things. You pull all those things in together into a cohesive design that really can become attractive and a magnet to downtown. And these are examples. They're all over the country. Obviously, palm trees and firs in the south, but you've got a canvas now for movie night, top left, festivals, day-to-day activities. Jen alluded to some things that could now be housed. Well, as this develops outward, those temporary items that could be done on the vacant sites, the vacant lot, or on the football field now could then move into the park space. I can't tell you how popular movable seating is. Adirondack-style chairs are all over the country now. They don't have to be Adirondack chairs, but they're very colorful and attractive, and they pull people in. Again, the notion of a pavilion, we're certainly not saying your pavilion architecture has to look like that, but the function should be something that it's transparent, but yet can house decent events. Again, another popular item. This is in Montreal, I believe. They've created a series of things that are moving objects, if you will, swings. They even have a seesaw set through town. You cannot get on these things on the weekend. Kids, people populate to them. They're constantly filled. And, and obviously outdoor dining and seating that could be housed within the park. There may be entities that have takeout foods, things like that. Post-COVID, a lot of people like to get their food and go somewhere else. That could be housed in spaces within the edges of the park. And then just you've got a blank canvas. There's so much creativity you can just push into all of this, particularly the park space, whether it's lighting or art, and things that can be interpretive. Again, things that can be viewed also not only during the day is exciting, but in the evening. The mayor mentioned the other night that there is a lot of heavy lifting that has to be done. You are very correct. There's a lot to take in at once. You can't build a town overnight. So what we have done is taken a crack at what we think is a direction with phasing to start to build up on the plan in a logical order that both begins public investment, but would also help leverage the private investment. Obviously, infrastructure is key to any development like that. The dark lines you see, getting the street network built right away and the infrastructure that would accompany with that, utilities, drainage, et cetera, is key. That gives you also then the framework to go ahead and build the park, build the town square, go ahead and get that off the ground. There may be other components. There may be components within the park that you do later versus now, but getting the sidewalks in, getting the trees, identifying the plaza areas, the parking edges, all of that, you go ahead and do that now. That gives you also a very attractive framework to go ahead and solicit and potentially get those two first downtown buildings built, the red areas, and of course, we can't have buildings without parking, which represents the parking, again, that would be located behind those buildings in phase one. And obviously with the road construction, as I alluded to, the area between the library and the community center would have to be redesigned as that gets built. A second phase then would be to complete the old Brandon Edge, if you will, and Bearderman. That's a very, very attractive corridor, obviously. Again, purple representing some parking improvements to both blocks that would happen. Another opportunity on the far right to get another mixed-use infill building in, as well as potentially opposite the plaza that I mentioned earlier. And then at this time also, as that accompanies, that interior construction accompanies also doing streetscape improvements, which would give the edge of Old Brandon and Biederman that kind of polished look. I mean, one of the words that we floated was, particularly along Brandon and Biederman, was treating it like a promenade, so that it's got activity along it. You've got storefronts, you've got things facing out on it. It's very walkable, shade, color, all those lighting, all those things that would make it very dynamic and exciting. And then lastly, the last phase would be relocating the health department building. The health department building obviously is a much needed community asset. When you're building a downtown, it's not necessarily something you want in the middle of your downtown. So at that point, you would probably want to consider relocating that, and then also removing or relocating the football field. The football field is great. I know it's got a lot of history to it, but it's not, football fields in downtowns, they're not exactly the best marriage, and it's also now a very valuable piece of land at this point. And then obviously expanding the parking that would be associated with the last potential infill site on the corner of Parkway and Biederman, and then the potential to fold in that housing that is in between those blocks. That housing site we put as a later phase, but if the market is there, that could really come on at any time. And then really long term, we're hoping that as this gets built, it's going to start as a catalyst and incentivize potential expansion ultimately of the downtown, and that would obviously occur to the north, and hopefully we would start to see again the opportunity for future mixed use that would potentially front the Parkway, and then continue adding residential uses, particularly along Park Drive, and then as it would slowly grow, up towards 80. And lastly but not least, the Public Works building has been in the middle of the plan throughout the thing. It's a great piece of architecture, but at this point, it may need to be relocated if there's a higher and better use that could be fulfilled in that building. We were talking internally that it's a really attractive site for another public use that might be more engaging to the community, such as the arts facility, and those sort of uses, potentially a museum that would be well centralized on Town Green, but not just a place to go pay your water bill.
Thank you, Andy. The only thing I'm going to do for a few moments is illustrate some of the concepts that Jennifer and Andy just outlined to you in sort of a photo rendering methodology, because sometimes my own brilliant doctor wife included, she doesn't understand two-dimensional plan drawings. And so sometimes if we can illustrate it in other mediums, then some of the concepts that you've just seen can be brought to life. So real quickly, I just want to revisit one that Jennifer showed you a while ago. We had a great conversation yesterday, especially with the artists, that there's this notion that people ascribe affinity to place either through one of two or both of these things, either because of the experiences they have there or because of the physical attributes of the place. And sometimes what we're going to do in a case like this, where we can't afford to build all this overnight, let's go ahead and foster and inculcate this place with a lot of positive experiences through activities so that we already get this movement of people to the site and they enjoy themselves there as a precursor to what they're going to experience later when the architecture arrives. So again, just a blank slate. It doesn't matter to me if you put it here on the corner with the gravel or on the football field, but it's a great opportunity for a pop-up park that sort of foreshadows the kinds of activities that can occur later in and around the architecture that creates these open spaces for what I would call multi-generational sort of beer garden environments where you can eat, dine, play, and experience lots of things. And again, multitude of places where this can be located. To land this plane close to home so you realize how easy and affordable this is the small town of Walhalla, South Carolina, where I live. This town probably has a couple thousand people, and in one weekend and for less than $5,000, they created a pop-up park. The Main Street manager landed a $5,000 grant. She recruited about half a dozen volunteers. You can see they sank the posts, they strung up the shade sails. And in a matter of 3 days, they had this pop-up merchant market. And so on some days, it serves as sort of their pop-up farmers market. At other times, it's a place where they have outdoor farm-to-table meals. And of course, what I want you to envision from the very first slide I showed you is imagine the power of this popping up on the city complex site or Midtown, and of course having a host of interactive games. If you've ever heard parents say, there's nothing for me to do downtown, this is one of the most affordable ways to introduce that concept without having to wait for the expensive architecture to arrive. The Carl Small Town Center associated with the School of Architecture at Mississippi State, you know, they've done this kind of strategies in some of the cities and towns around Mississippi. They most recently did this with pop-up Lego competitions, and it's just a really fun, interactive way for students to engage with public spaces. This is a project that I worked on in Lake City, South Carolina. We had the high school art department design 9 custom golf courses out of sheets of 4x8 plywood, and the nearby vocational technical school constructed them. And so the art department created these 9 custom golf courses and this miniature golf, putt-putt. And in this one location where regrettably a building burned down, we created a pop-up free of charge miniature golf kind of place. During Masters Week, because Augusta's only about 80 miles away, we distribute it through town so that if you're a golfer, you'll know what this means. We can play through downtown. It was a lot of fun. So, and then of course you've seen these other kind of vibrancy amenities. So I'm going to also illustrate 2 other things. And the second one is, I think Pearl plays host to more strip shopping centers than any place I've ever been. Congratulations, you win the award. And of course, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. Some of them look better than others, and unfortunately, or ironically, I picked one that actually looks pretty darn good. But I just wanted to illustrate some simple concepts to improve even one that looks good, so that you can, in your mind's eye, say, wow, imagine what that would do to some of the ones out on Highway 80, okay? And so the first and the most important thing, and I'm way out of my field of expertise, is just landscape architecture, man. So imagine the power if all we did is we inserted a sidewalk. We have any sidewalk fans in town? It's a lot easier to walk and not die when you have a sidewalk. And then adjacent to that sidewalk, putting a simple grass planting strip. And it's amazing the difference that just a few shrubs and some grass and some trees, and all of a sudden you take the pressure out of the architecture having to do all the heavy lifting, because now you have something that kind of creates that buffer between the roadway and the parked automobiles. In the second phase, and of course Ben's lovely colorful banners do a lot to introduce color and vibrancy into the town. One of the mistakes a lot of communities make is they plant really small trees. It's like, we don't want big trees because they'll block our storefront and our signs. Well, that's ironically, it's just the opposite. If you plant a small tree when it's fully mature, it will block all of your signage. And so you need to plant large shade trees. And again, consult your local arborist for the best time to plant large shade trees. In my humble opinion, the best time to plant a large shade tree is 20 years ago. But anyway, go ahead and start next week and begin. You can see when these trees become full grown, then the canopy exists above the signage. So the only thing I've done architecturally on this one is, it's really subtle, so I'm going to zoom in so you can see, is to, at the bottom, one of the things, especially in sort of mid-century architecture, you're kind of dealing with a very low form of Art Deco international style. One of the things that they often did is they painted a dark wainscot, and you can see you already had that going on in this building. Let me go back. So you can see they already had this, whoa, hello, that's right, the laser pointer doesn't work here, my apologies. But you had this low stone, and it looks just fine as it is, by the way. Again, this is a very attractive shopping center. But if you wanted to anchor it to the ground even more visually, then introduce a darker color on that paint on the stone to kind of anchor the building to the roadway, to the ground itself. and perhaps consider a more neutral color on the upper stucco. And then finally, perhaps at the base of these columns, introduce, something to anchor them, whether it's brick or stone. Last but not least, we're about to show you kind of an image of the infill development called Midtown that Andy's introduced to you. But it's important for me to say a few things before I do, because we run the risk. The only problem with the medium of photo rendering, on one hand, it's helpful for people to visualize things. The problem is sometimes people get locked into the architecture. You have to promise me something, and here's the promise. This week, occasionally we could hear in people's voices a little bit of either embarrassment or discouragement that you didn't already have a downtown. I want to reframe that conversation. And I want to reframe that perspective in this way. I want you to see this as a grand opportunity. You get to get it right. Okay? Because you get to design and build a downtown now, you get to borrow from the best of the best downtowns you've ever experienced. Whether it's Franklin, Tennessee, or Greenville, South Carolina, perhaps it's Fairhope, Alabama. I don't know what your favorite towns are that have that quality sense of place. But you have to promise me something, and the promise I want you to make me is borrow from the best of Pearl and not someplace else. Okay? I'm not going to name towns near you, but you know who I'm talking about, these towns that look like a place that doesn't even look like Mississippi. Honor the best of Pearl. These buildings that reside currently on the site are fantastic. The designers that built them and designed them did an excellent job. I couldn't recreate that in the amount of hours it took me to do this rendering, so I had to borrow from the best of some other place. The point I'm making is when you design these buildings, be sure that they honor the best of Pearl and they reflect what you value and not someplace else. Here are your existing conditions. This is at the intersection. Of course, you know where we are. It's Old Brandon Road and Beardeman. And this is just a photo illustration of the concepts that Andy showed you in plan view a few years into the future. So allow me just to kind of walk you through some of the components that you're seeing here by zooming in. First of all, we want to have, at a minimum, a 2-story, ideally even a 3-story building that anchors the corners and the edges of this site. This density is important because, number one, you have limited land, but it introduces this ability for you to have mixed use with restaurants and retail on the first floor, professional offices and or apartments on the second, and for sure upper loft living on the third floors. But what they really afford you to do are these fantastic outdoor spaces. Again, you have this really, ambitious intersection treatment where we've taken that icon that Ben developed of the magnolia superimposed over the home plate that can sort of anchor this. In the report, we'll talk about treatments that can either be temporary or permanent depending on your desire. It's a very small thing, but I'm a big fan of really demarcating these crosswalks. I understand, you have the painted white lines, and that's wonderful. That's a good start. But the benefit of having some texture in that is that it creates a tactile situation where the automobile passing over it hears that rumble. And it also provides a color so that the pedestrian stands out in high contrast to the crosswalk, and it promotes pedestrian safety. Again, we would like to anchor the corner with a welcome to Midtown Pearl using the branding elements that Ben introduced, as well as some colorful flowers and landscaping, and making sure that the plaza, by the way, we heard over and over again you wanted a grocery store, so why don't we just let that sucker occupy the prime real estate of the corner. But again, there's nothing that creates activity in the sense of vibrancy in downtown than outdoor dining, especially under colorful umbrellas and bistro tables. And this affords that. And again, you can see Ben's bannering system marching down the roadway. On the other side, more the same, but creating architecture, again, that responds both to the environment as well as to the uses and the needs that you have. I think it can be a very transformative opportunity in the life of Pearl. Again, you have some extremely talented architectural firms here in Jackson near Pearl. You can rely upon them to come up with architecture that's going to honor this architecture of the site. Here's just some arbitrary examples from other places of this mixed use that I think could be responsive. I'll let you all wrestle with where you want to fall in the continuum between something that looks a little bit more traditional or something that looks a bit more contemporary. And one more time for fun and giggles before I give up the floor to Thomas, before and after, and hopefully you like after better.
All right, we are closing in on our time together. I have just a few more slides to show you, and I think Andy and Randy have done a really great job of illustrating sort of the vision that our team has come up with for this particular parcel of land, sort of what we see as phase one in the development of Midtown. But we also know that there's a lot of land between here and Highway 80 that is ripe for future expansion and development. If we're successful in creating an anchor on this site, we know that that energy is going to spill north to Highway 80. So what I'm going to be talking about is some zoning principles that we feel like are really important for the city to adopt if you're going to create the type of development that Randy has just illustrated. Then it's going to require some zoning policies that deliver the type of development that you all have told us this past week that you want to see moving forward. Now, this is an image I took from the front door of the hotel that we stayed at this week. This is the Home 2 Suites out on Riverwind Drive. And Randy, we were all working hard last night. As y'all can tell, we've done a lot of work in a short amount of time. So we were burning the midnight oil, but Randy and I wanted to step out and grab a bite to eat. And so we decided to go to Ichiban, which is right next door. Well, as it stands, you know, we were here, and there's Ichiban. As the crow flies, it's about 250 feet, right? Would have been a 30-second walk. But unfortunately, there's no connection between those two sites. And so instead of just walking directly to the front door, this is the path that we took. And I'll tell you, the leg on Riverwind, there's no sidewalk there. And so Randy and I were walking against traffic. It wasn't a very long distance, but it was not safe. It was not. And, you know, as we were walking through the parking lot to get back there, cars were coming. And so it's just an example of, you know, commercial development when it's designed for automobiles instead of pedestrians. We'll show you this again. You know, in traditional commercial development, this is not you know, unique to Pearl by any means. It's called sort of pad site development, where a developer comes in, they pour a pad, which becomes the parking lot, and then the retail, you know, the use gets plopped on top of it. You know, next door, they built Ichiban Asian restaurant. They poured the pad, built the building. All right, then they wanted to do a second concept, which is more hibachi and sushi. New pad, new building, and then along comes the putt-putt golf course. New pad, new development. And so you can see just sort of how traditional commercial development occurs. And it's not by accident, because what gets built is what the zoning ordinance prescribes. And if you look at Pearl zoning ordinance, its general commercial district, you know, this is sort of the precedent imagery that comes from the zoning ordinance of what that zone builds, right? You got a building sort of setback, you've got parking up front, typically one-story commercial, large lot size, which is appropriate for certain parts of Pearl, right? It's appropriate for highway commercial development on Highway 80, and it's appropriate for areas near the interstate where we were, although there probably could have been a few more sidewalks even where we were. But if you want to build a place like this, the type of development that we're talking about, the downtown feeling commercial development with a mix of uses, this is what y'all told us you want Midtown Pearl to be. Your zoning ordinance, as it stands today, will not allow this type of development in the C2 zone. It requires all sorts of variances. You would have to get a variance on the lot size to build this. You'd have to get a variance on the setbacks. You'd have to get a variance on the parking requirements, on the building height. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're talking about tonight. So if we want to build this building, then it necessarily requires a new way of thinking in your zoning ordinance. And so this is from your zoning ordinance, right? This is your zoning map, and all of that red is C2. If you build on land that is zone C2, the type of development that you're going to get is the home to suites and the Ichiban, the pad type development without the connectivity. You're not going to get that downtown retail mixed use that we're looking for. So as we expand north, so y'all know y'all know where we are here. and what we've talked about really is just this lower third of this Main Street district, which is bounded on the left by Valentour, on the right by Beardeman, Old Brandon's on the south, and then it goes all the way up to Highway 80. That's your Main Street district. Everything that Andy's designed and Randy has shown is really this lower third. And so as development expands to the north, I think the first thing as redevelopment occurs, our recommendation is for y'all to make these two quick connections. Because in a Main Street setting, in a traditional downtown, smaller blocks increases walkability, and it increases the type of development that you're looking to build. So step one, as soon as you get the opportunity to sort of connect those streets all the way through to sort of make those blocks a little bit smaller, you're going to want to do that. And then you're going to want to establish, and this is something, Mr. Mayor, that we can point you in the right direction and get to work on literally tomorrow, is establishing what we're calling the Midtown Mixed Use District. All right, this is a new zoning district that doesn't exist today. It'll have a new classification and a new set of rules that's going to ensure that the development that occurs in this zone gets built the way that you say that you want it to be built. It's going to go on the south side of Old Brandon Road and on either side of Valentour. So if you're going up Valentour, it's going to be on the left and the right. Same for Beardeman, left and the right. And then we stop on the south side of Highway 80. You've got a frontage road there that would provide you with the opportunity to build something walkable. But we felt that it was a little too much to try to extend it on the north side of the highway, because realistically, you're not going to be getting people to walk from one side of Highway 80 all the way across. This is where we are recommending that you establish your Midtown mixed-use district. And what's different about the proposed district that we're proposing is that it's a form-based district. We're going to be really concerned with how the buildings look and feel and sit on the site, as opposed to specifically the use, which is what traditional zoning is most concerned with. We're going to be looking for build-to lines as opposed to setbacks, right? We want the buildings to come all the way to the sidewalk, so we have that sense of enclosure. We want a minimum of 2 stories, no more 1-story buildings in our mixed-use district. We want some vertical density, in some cases 3 and maybe 4 stories tall, especially on corners, to sort of anchor that corner. Minimum story height, typically it's no less than 12 feet on the first floor. So again, you sort of get that height. Sidewalks everywhere. As Randy said, you can't walk safely if you don't have sidewalks. And so in most places, a minimum of an 8-foot sidewalk. In other places, it'll be even wider, 10 or 12 feet, especially if we're wanting to introduce some outdoor dining, right? You want to have even wider sidewalks to accommodate that. On-street parking, rear parking, no more parking in the front, right? We want to push that to the back or push it onto the street so we create that walkability and vibrancy. Exterior glazing, that just means windows, right? When you're walking down a downtown and there's big glass windows, you can see inside the building. It sort of creates this awareness of movement inside the building that activates a downtown. Attached structures, right? Right now, you build a building and you have a side yard setback until you can build the next building. Well, in a downtown setting, the buildings are actually attached. They share a wall. And so it creates that unbroken street facade that creates that downtown feel. And then materials are also really important. And in Mississippi and in Pearl specifically, based on the architecture of this building and the others that we feel like are really well done, brick is going to be your primary exterior material with some stone accents, because you've got some stone elements that are appropriate as well. This is an example from a form-based mixed-use district in Helena, Montana. I throw this in here not so that you get lost in the details of what the setbacks are, but to show how a form-based zoning code functions differently. It's very visual, it's very graphic, and it illustrates the type of development that you want. And so here you can see that they're requiring 50% of their building to have a 0-foot setback. It's got to come all the way up to the sidewalk. You've got minimum building heights. You've got parking in the rear. Here's another graphic that shows glazing and why it's important to have windows and a minimum percentage of the exterior facade covered by windows, and how you step a building back as it gets taller. and those sorts of design principles that, if you follow, will help whoever builds it. I mean, on this side, it's going to be, the city having a very tight control over what gets built. But in the area north of where we are to Highway 80, as the market develops and redevelops that land, if you have a good form-based code, on the books, whoever develops it, if they follow that, you ensure that it's going to be what you're looking for. Use plays an important role. We obviously want to prioritize retail and service. I know Rachel mentioned hair salons is a need. So the types of services that people are looking for, restaurants, lounges, grocery markets. You've already got a lot of government and public use here. Office is necessary. These are your insurance salespeople and real estate offices. They're important, but they're not optimal uses on the ground floor because they don't introduce a lot of foot traffic. You want to preserve your ground level retail space for things that generate foot traffic. So office typically goes on the second floor of these mixed-use buildings with residential on the upper floors. And residential uses, the majority of the land between here and Highway 80 is currently residential. And as it redevelops, we feel that certain residential types are appropriate, but we would encourage higher density residential. So you're looking at condos, loft apartments, two-story townhomes, fourplexes, live-work facilities. You've already got Pearl has a lot of sort of single-family detached housing. When we looked at your housing availability, you don't have a lot of this type of housing type. So this introduces a new opportunity for a different type of housing into the Pearl market. And then just a list of some incompatible uses, right? These are things that we would not want to see in the Midtown mixed-use district moving forward. And if we do that, right, if we introduce this new zoning classification and new district with new guidelines, then we know that whatever gets built, in this area over time, will have the type of feel that we're looking for, this vibrant area with a mix of uses that starts to take on this sense of community that we look for in Midtown Pearl. So with that, we're just really thankful for all of the input that we received this week. To sort of hit the high points one more time, our 4 sort of thematic recommendations are to recalibrate the market, sort of focusing on your internal market and providing those things that you as Pearl residents are looking for in your community. We feel like Midtown Pearl is going to be the destination for those unique and locally owned businesses that you all have told us you want to see. Proudly tell your story using that branding package that Ben Muldrow has put together for you to establish the destination of Midtown Pearl and to make those connections that Jen talked about, between here and the area on the east side and the west side. And then, bringing Midtown to life with some of those activation strategies, some of the events that you're already hosting, and some of these new ideas for bringing some of these areas of Midtown to life with pop-up parks and food trucks and these things that bring vibrancy into the downtown. And then, gosh, y'all are going to be able to build Mississippi's newest downtown. How cool is that? And with the tools and the strategies that we've provided, we feel like y'all are in a really good position to sort of take this to the next level. So with that, I want to tell you a little bit about where we go from here, what are the next steps. Almost, immediately, within 24 hours at least, we're going to take this presentation and upload it to YouTube so that Kathy and Stacy and others in the room, the mayor, can share this with the community. We want, we've got a good crowd tonight, but we want everybody in Pearl to have an opportunity to see this and to understand, what we're recommending for Pearl. It's going to take us about 6 to 8 weeks to take all of this information and to write it up into a really comprehensive report that we'll provide to the Mainstreet program. It's going to go into much further detail on a lot of these things that the Mainstreet program and the city will use to really implement, the strategies that we've laid out. And we're also, after we deliver that report and the Mainstreet program and the city has had a chance to sort of digest it a little bit, we're going to host what we call an implementation workshop. We're going to sit down with the leaders in the community and the Mainstreet program sort of talk through and walk through and identify some of those low-hanging fruit items, some of the things that we can start to work on almost immediately, as well as some of those mid and longer-term projects, so that this doesn't just become, a grand idea that never sees reality, right? We want to look back 5, 6, 10 years from now and see Midtown Pearl, thriving in your community. And then our organization at the state level, Jennifer and I, we work with all of our Main Street programs to provide ongoing training, support for our Main Street programs, to keep things moving along. So with that, thank you for your time, and we appreciate y'all coming out tonight. Our team will be up front for a few minutes. If any of y'all would like to come and ask questions, we're here for a little while.
Just for everybody in the room, I appreciate everyone participating. We had a really good crowd, and so we look forward to moving forward and implementing some of these things that were presented tonight. And I got to go because I got a Little League baseball game at 7:15.